Hello, I'm Pip Courtney and welcome to A Taste of Landline. We're going to be with you on Saturday nights for a while longer this year because Gardening Australia is in its new time slot on Friday nights at 7:30. Coming up, Pippis, from bait to restaurant plates.
Yeah, it's become very, very popular in most restaurants.
The healing power of honey and Australia's living fences.
We're slowly now just starting to trim them again and lay them over in the traditional way.
Hello, I'm Kerry State in South Australia's Coorong National Park, which is also home to the country's largest Pippi fishery. Now, not so long ago, most of the cockles collected here were sold as bait, but they're now making their way onto a growing number of restaurant plates. It's a wild and secluded workplace few have witnessed. This 70-kilometre stretch of coastline is part of the Coorong National Park in South Australia and home to the country's largest commercial Pippi fishery.
A lot of people wouldn't even know it exists, really. But, you know, you get down here and you look how beautiful it is. I can't, picture a better office, to be honest.
A net, bare feet and a good technique, and you're pretty much set. Although not every newcomer is a natural at the cockle dance.
It's just simultaneously working each feet through the sand to build a big enough trench and get the cockles up out of the sand. Yeah, for the first 2 weeks you really feel quite unco and sort of, what the hell am I doing? But no, once you get it, it's like riding a bike. You've got it.
Pippis come in with the tide to feed. And despite their sedate appearance, Darren Hode says they're quick to try and make a getaway when they're disturbed.
Everybody thinks they're just a dumb cockle that lays on the beach, but sometimes you'll just see them, they'll be laying on the sand and all of a sudden they'll stick their tongue out and be gone within a matter of a second.
These guys are out here all year round, come rain or shine. And while shuffling in the shallows in this beautiful setting is an appealing prospect most of the time, the lack of footwear can wear a bit thin in winter.
In the middle of winter and we've got high tides and big swells up over our heads sometimes. That's not too nice. The second you get in the water you're saturated and you spend another 4 hours in the water digging the cockles, so it does get pretty cold.
Darren Hode's crew harvests the same way his father did. He says the hands or feet-on approach is more sustainable than mechanising the process. Indeed, the fishery was the first in the state to be certified by the Marine Stewardship Council, which provides independent environmental accreditation. And the environment is certainly returning the love at the moment. Many attribute the healthy population to the introduction of a quota system a decade ago. It was a controversial decision by the state government and one that divided the fishery, with some of the 30 or so licence holders unhappy with how the individual catch allocations were calculated.
I mean, it was just crazy. We entered into a market where the more we fished, the more we collapsed the price.
While the margins weren't attractive, the low-value industry at least allowed Tom Robinson to get his foot in the door when he bought into the fishery in 2002. The former advertising executive was in need of a sea change and saw Pippis as a relatively affordable way to chase his dream of being a fisherman.
I saw myself down on the beach, the sun on my face, digging cockles, mucking around with vehicles. I still love those things, I'm just not very good at it. But the things that I have been able to bring from my advertising days is the ability to brand a product and value add it.
Value-adding these molluscs has certainly gained momentum over the last decade. Traditionally, they were just seen as bait, albeit a very good bait when it came to hooking King George whiting. But the humble fisherman's friend has now turned into the prized catch.
It was a bait fishery when we started, and you were lucky to get $1 a kilo for it. And then, sort of when the human consumption market came along, all of a sudden it was, $5, $6, $7, $10 a kilo for pippies, and yeah, it was amazing. So all of a sudden we didn't have to work 7 days a week, daylight till dark, to make money.
Driving that change in fortune in recent times has been Gulwa Pippi Co. While historically licence holders were highly competitive and did their own thing, several former rivals who control just over 60% of fishery production have now joined forces. Gulwa Pippi Co started by supplying fresh cockles to wholesalers and wet fish markets in mainly Sydney and Melbourne. It also exports a small amount of live product to Europe and Asia. But the 5-day shelf life of the loose shellfish can be a deterrent for potential retail and restaurant customers. So, with the help of a government grant, the owners installed a packing line which modifies the atmosphere around the pippies to 80% oxygen and 20% carbon dioxide. That doubled the shelf life and opened new doors. In the meantime, there's a growing number of restaurants adding pippies to their menus, including Jolly's Boathouse in Adelaide.
There's a certain childhood memory in Adelaide of going down to Gulwa, doing some cockling, doing the crazy dance on the sand, bringing the cockles back, and yeah, it's become very, very popular in most restaurants in South Australia.
What's the biggest mistake people make when they're cooking them?
Overcooking them. Once they're overcooked, they can go quite tight, quite rubbery. It's a very quick process, minute and a half. It's the original fast food.
For Chef Tony Carroll, pippies tick some very important boxes. They're affordable for him and popular with diners.
We serve ours a little bit different here. We serve ours with a Calabrian pork sausage. We finish it with some shaved fennel, parsley and garlic butter. And there we have it. Beautiful local Gulwa pippies.
Producer Tony Robinson says this is just the start of what's to come in product development. But he's pretty stoked with the first course.
Seeing our product on a menu in a really fancy restaurant, it still makes me giggle when I see it. It's to see where that product's come from and the perception people had of it as being a bait-only product. I mean, it's just amazing.
Well, we're all living the dream, aren't we? The people in the city are wishing that they were here with us. It's a good lifestyle, but there's not always a fortune in it. But, we live in hope. We're gamblers.
Hello, I'm Sean Murphy. Honeybee populations around the world have been devastated by the parasite varroa mite. So far in Australia we've been lucky, they haven't arrived here yet, but our bees are still vulnerable, and among the biggest risks are insecticides.
It's Western Australia's famous tourism destination, but Rottnest Island has another lesser-known claim to fame. It's also home to what's probably the longest continuous queen bee breeding program anywhere in the world. Every year about 300 hives are shipped to Rottnest, where nature takes its course, hidden from view in the centre of the island.
It's basically just a line breeding program.
Colin Flay is one of 8 commercial beekeepers who pool their resources to run what's known as the Better Bee program.
Why Rottnest?
Because it's far enough off the mainland. See, Rottnest is 16k off the mainland, a drone will fly 8 and a queen will fly 5, so that gives you 13k, so you've got a 3k buffer. So really the only drones that these queens can mate with are the ones that we bring into the island. And then they mate like most things do on Rotto, I guess, and then, yeah, we'll find out how we went.
Back on the mainland, the queens are sorted to sustain an industry which has been closed to the rest of Australia for 40 years. The breeding program was started by the Department of Agriculture in 1980 because quarantine restrictions meant queens could no longer be sourced from the eastern states. After nearly 40 years of continuous genetic improvement, the program's queens are renowned for their calm temperament and ability to breed bees, producing nearly double the global average of honey per hive.
And then we mark her as well, just it's easy to find the queen in a big box if she's marked.
Tiffany Bates has been breeding queens for the last 6 years for the University of WA. The best are worth up to $1,200 each, but most of the Rottnest queens are kept by the beekeepers in the program.
Well, she's the breeder, really. So some people think that she's running things. That seems to not be the case. She can lay 2,000 eggs a day. She also pumps pheromones out from all different parts of her body, her feet, her abdomen, and the bees check on those pheromones all the time to make sure she's functioning properly. And if she's not, they'll supersede her, they'll make a new one. So it's a pretty ruthless situation.
It's not just the breeding program in WA that stands the industry apart here. Bioactive honey from the state's unique jarrah and other forests has been discovered by the world, sparking a liquid gold rush.
Oh yeah, they're all coming in now, mate, as soon as people realise the worth of the product, because, you know, it sells itself. If you've got a good product that has major health benefits, well, then people are going to want it, and if there's a market that's got quite a premium on it compared to the normal price of honey.
Prices are based on bioactivity, the level of medical and health-giving properties in the honey, and the strongest have earned as much as $100 a kilogram in China. Independent testing of jarrah and marri honey in New Zealand last year found it had stronger antimicrobial properties than Manuka honey.
Yeah, we've got a good range of honeys this year. I'm noticing that there's quite a bit of variation in colour here.
Ken Dodds is running a $3 million research program at WA's Chem Centre Analytical Laboratory, helping build science-backed foundations for WA's emerging active honey industry. So far, tests have shown the WA product also has strong anti-inflammatory properties and is prebiotic, helping improve human gut health. Key to the research will be creating a certification system for the varied range of bioactivity in the forest honeys.
Really what I'm doing is helping them produce something more consistently and more clearly identifying for them the key attributes of those honey that they can then use in their marketing. And then the Chemistry Centre, of course, is providing the international certification that gives the credibility that enables them to get a really good price for their product.
Australia's biggest honey producer, Capilano, bought into the WA market in 2013 and is now the state's biggest producer. It says the new research will help change what has historically been a cottage industry, producing mostly blended honeys. The company says new industry standards can help protect consumers from the sort of market fraud which has plagued New Zealand's Manuka exports. It's believed 2 to 3 times more Manuka is sold globally than is actually produced across the Tasman.
With Western Australian jarrah, for instance, we want to make sure there's a honey standard for that jarrah, right from the word, you know, from the forage area in the bush right through to the actual end product being sold in the retail outlet overseas or whatever. So they can trace it back right through to the actual area where the honey came from.
The biggest risk to the industry is biosecurity. and the state is relying on border controls and nearly 50 sentinel hives like this one near Fremantle. They're the first line of defence against introduced pests such as the varroa mite, which has devastated honeybee populations all over the world. Rottnest Island's Better Bee program has been central to maintaining a healthy, chemical-free industry in WA. Now it could also play a leading role in finding solutions to the biggest threat to bee populations around the world.
Oh, you're getting into it now. Yeah, that'll be an essential part of the breeding queens. Because of its isolation on Rottnest Island, you could go and set up a permanent breeding program over there and supply the rest of the mainland with, and you could trial varroa resistant stock and things like that. So yeah, the Rottnest Island project is sort of an integral part of the whole survival sort of mechanism we've got in plan, yeah.
Oyster first, little chew, little maceration, get it going, and then little sips of the pig pool, and it will linger. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Fiona Breen. In colonial Australia, hedgerows were the earliest form of farm fencing. Now, practitioners of an ancient craft are restoring them on some of Australia's oldest rural properties. This could be a scene from the 1830s. Sheep feeding in a patchwork of green paddocks, divided by traditional hedgerows. The only telltale sign that this is the 21st century is a centre pivot irrigator sitting in the distance.
Hedges were planted by the assigned convicts, were assigned by the colonial government at the time to each property. And the convicts were responsible for getting the ground into a farming state, and part of that was to plant hedges so the family could plant crops and grow crops for the early colony.
As early European farmers in the 1830s, the Jumerics developed the 1,600 hectare Mount Ira estate in Tasmania's Northern Midlands. They planted prickly hawthorn hedges across the property. Remarkably, sixth-generation farmer Piers Jumeric still has the property's original plans, drawn up by his ancestor, Tasmania's first surveyor, Edward Jumeric.
You can still see these hedges today, so they're still along these fence lines, and the roads are still where they planned for the roads to be, and most of these paddock boundaries still exist even today.
And this one here, for example, it still survives?
This one here is the ram paddock, and it's still known as the ram paddock, and it still has exactly these boundaries as it is drawn on this map.
Like most early European farmers in Tasmania, the Jumerics were responding to a call from Lieutenant Governor George Arthur to make the Van Diemen's Land colony self-sustaining. They were granted the use of 20 convicts, and it was those transported from the UK that brought the hedge laying skills with them. About 30 kilometres of hedgerow fencing was planted nearly 200 years ago. Now the family is spending time and money restoring the hedges that remain.
The hedges haven't been really looked after for the last 60 or 70 years, but basically since wire became widespread on the property. And so we're slowly now just starting to trim them again, lay them over in the traditional way and bring them back into their traditional working order.
This 21st century farmer admits the 19th century form of agricultural fencing that remains on the property is still effective.
There's a lot of benefits. I'm not sure I'd be doing it today because of the cost of establishing them, but they do make magnificent fences when they are in good working condition. Well, they don't fall down, which is nice. So they're very low maintenance, apart from the odd bit of trimming and bit of chainsaw work to keep them stock proof, but that's about it. They generally just look after themselves.
The Jumerics have contracted one of Australia's few traditionally trained hedge layers, James Boxall, to help restore hedgerows along the property's driveway. He trained in the ancient craft overseas and is now accredited with the UK's Professional Hedge Laying Society.
All the old hedges used to say, hawthorn loves being cut, loves the axe, it responds very well. We get a lot of vigorous new growth after they've been worked.
Less than a handful of skilled hedge layers work around Australia, but James Boxall is hoping to change that. He's teaching the ancient craft to a team of young trainees working for the not-for-profit land care group Greening Australia.
Cut as much away of there as you can. That's it. Keep going. Keep going. Yep, that's good. He's down there now. Well done.
Typically, the hedge layer will cut the base of the branches savagely to a point where there's just enough wood fibres for the sap to continue to flow through. The long branches are laid flat. Those fibres are still connected to the plant base.
Out of everything that we do here, that's the most important cut. Nice down, low to the ground.
Once a section is laid flat, one branch on top of the other like dominoes, stakes are driven into the hedge line at even spacing.
Yep, that's got him. Good one. Yep, they're all pretty good. So everyone remembers there, so that's our measurement there, that's the cubit, the old biblical measurement.
Binders, which can be anything from dogwood to willow, are woven around the top of the stakes to secure the branches in place.
People often say, these old hawthorn hedges, they won't hold cattle in, or you trim them and they still can't make them stock proof. This was how they were made stock proof. They'd be cut and laid every 20, 30, 40 years and trimmed, and then in 30 or 40 years' time, the next farm manager would start looking at the hedge and go, it's looking a bit thin or gappy there, and I think the sheep might start pushing through there. So they would then get the next hedge layer in and make it a nice stock proof hedge again.
In the western districts of Victoria, Australia's only female hedge layer, Kate Ellis, is encouraging people around the historic Kyneton area to look after their botanic history. The environmental scientist turned traditional hedge layer has taken to the ancient craft with a passion.
When I first started, nobody knew what hedge laying was, so I actually gave quite a few talks around the area for different groups, and just everybody knows that I'm the hedge layer in this region now, and people are really interested in it, and I've done botanical gardens and private hedges, so I think if you ask anyone in Kyneton about hedge laying, most people know what it is.
She first came across the craft while working as a scientist in the UK. On returning to Australia, she soon swapped scientific research for the more physical craft of hedge laying.
Studying in Scotland, occasionally when I did field work, I would come across hedge layers, and the work fascinated me because it looked so brutal. And it stuck in the back of my mind, and when I moved back to Australia, I came here and here was this horrible looking hedge, and it was either rip it out or do something to it. So I thought I'll try and do what they were doing overseas, which is hedge laying. So I bought a book. I went and saw James Boxall in Tasmania for a day, and he showed me the basic elements of hedge laying, and I just got to it.
Her work on her own boundary hedge attracted the attention of locals. Soon she was working on hawthorn hedges all through the winter.
Oh, it's not glamorous at all, but it keeps me very fit. And I like the outdoors and I love the end result. So, yeah, I'm not sure how many years I could keep it up for, but while I'm still young enough and fit enough, I'm happy to do it each winter.
The thrill of preserving these ancient hedges and passing on a dying craft keeps these passionate landscape gardeners working through the coldest winters, cutting, pushing, bending and chainsawing the thorny and at times nasty plants back into the shape of the traditional fences of Australia's past. It's brutal for the plant and the hedge layer, but the end result is a beautiful, thriving restoration of botanic history.
I love it. It gets me out of the house, takes me to beautiful places, and I create beautiful, aesthetically pleasing structures.
In spring, back in Tasmania, the Jumeric's property is dotted with new life and new spring colour. The hedges are starting to sprout.
And that's the show. And for those who can't get enough Landline, our regular Sunday show is back at the new time of 12:30. We hope you can join us. Next time on A Taste of Landline, the Australian coconut craze, fighting fires with ancient practices, and the retired chefs on an outback adventure.